We're talking about a controversial new measure that aims to reduce street violence. It's happening at the moment in the Danish capital of Copenhagen, and criminals with a history of assault, vandalism and weapon offences will be banned from setting foot in busy areas at night to reduce crime after dark.
Police will patrol popular nightlife areas ready to issue fines to known offenders. So, is it a good idea? And should we adopt a similar approach here in the UK to keep our streets safe?
I think it's unfair. I think if they're ex-convicts and they've paid for their crimes, then I think they should be allowed back into society.
I don't think that they should be treated as subhuman just because they've spent time in prison.
I would lean more towards, yeah, they shouldn't be out in the streets if it's severe crime. Maybe a bit of leniency if it's not so severe.
So a mixture of views from our viewers that we spoke to. We're now joined by political commentator Dominic Samuels, who says keeping offenders off the streets will make it safer for everyone else. And we have defence barrister Chris Dorr, who says treating criminals like this will encourage criminal behaviour. Good morning to both of you. Chris, if we can start with you. In your experience, in your job and your everyday life, you're a defence lawyer and QC. What would be sort of the reaction, do you think, from those people that you work with to something like this? Would they understand that there's a reason behind it, that the idea is it's to keep people safe? Or would they see it, as one of our contributors said there, as being treated as subhuman?
Well, it's exactly the latter. You know, over nearly 30 years of criminal practice, there's one thing I've learned, which is that when you treat people who go through the criminal justice system as if they're some lower form of life, that's exactly how they'll behave in the future. I mean, this policy arises from Mette Frederiksen, the Danish Prime Minister, who's come to power, or came to power a couple of years ago on a right-wing platform, anti-immigrant, anti-immigration, tough on crime in inverted commas, and all of this, I'm afraid, is just a political gimmick in Denmark. And if we go down this route here, it'll be a political gimmick here. The one thing it will do is ensure that particularly young people, particularly from immigrant backgrounds, who have been singled out by the Danish Prime Minister as being often responsible for this kind of activity, we just end up with communities and sections of communities who are completely alienated in our society, who don't trust the police and don't participate in mainstream society. So you just create this whole kind of section of society who's excluded and can never really get into employment, never get into proper housing. And this is exactly the sort of policy that just doesn't work.
Some people would say, though, Chris, who cares if they're excluded from society and don't get to have a job, if what it means is the streets are safer for those who haven't committed crimes. Let them just, you know, have to suffer. They committed the crime, and therefore they have to pay the price for life.
You're absolutely right. Some people will say that, and they're wrong, because it won't be the individuals who pay the price, in inverted commas. It's the rest of us. Because when you have this large group of people in society who are excluded from, as I've just described, all they do is commit crime against ordinary people in more numbers and against more victims than ever before. So if people's reaction to this is a good thing, because we're just sort of throwing these people, forcing them into some sort of permanent lockdown or enforced kind of incarceration in their homes, all that's going to do is make them angry, and they'll go out and commit more crime. It's not going to stop somebody who's really intent on going out to commit crime anyway. The impact on this will only be on those who are trying their best to keep to the law. Okay. Because most people, if they're intent on going out to commit violence, they don't care what the law says. And they won't care about a potential fine.
Dominic, let's come to you on this, because, of course, you know, a lot of people will be saying this morning, these offenders have already served their time. They've done their time for the crime that they've committed, and that's an important part of the justice system, isn't it? Why should they then be forced to be controlled where they go and their time and their behaviour with these restrictions?
Yeah, I think I'd understand where you were coming from if, like, that was actually the case. And we do similar things here already. For example, with licensing conditions set out by the parole board, these include exclusion zones that restrict offenders from certain places. We do it with criminal behaviour orders, which can prohibit offenders from entering certain places at certain times. And then there's a sentence imposed with respect to the offence. And this new law has actually been tried out already. A 31-year-old man was sentenced under the new law by a Copenhagen city court, and the suspect was banned from visiting nighttime hubs in the Danish capital for 8 months. So it wasn't for a lifetime. If it was for a lifetime, I'd completely agree, and it'd be quite frankly illogical. But it's not permanent, and that was paired with a 6-month sentence after he assaulted several people and smashed a window. And with the specifics of this this particular policy, it's actually between 12 and 5 a.m. And if you think about this logically, bars and restaurants are not going to be open at that time. Come on, you can still go to a bar and a restaurant. The issue is, I think, particularly with clubs, and I think we do have to prioritise the victims here. I think individuals have a right not to be attacked and harassed in the street, and as to business owners, this wouldn't be permanent, and I think, you know, it's a common sense solution.
Well, you say it wouldn't be permanent. I suppose one of the difficulties of implementation, though, is if somebody has committed a crime, been sentenced and served their sentence, and they come out, you're then presuming, aren't you, that they might still be a risk, in which case it begs the question, why have they been released? And if you then impose a restriction for 8 months, what's to stop them after 8 months, a year or 2 years, then being a danger if they're out between 12 and 5. So it makes it very difficult to bring into force, because you've either got to, which you said was illogical, ban them for life, or you're starting to get into a real mess of a situation.
I think those are some really good points to raise. However, I think that sort of question can be posed in terms of the wider framework of our criminal justice system, as with exclusion zones that already exist and, you know, public order offences that do include being banned from certain places. And actually, in 2011, Manchester did a similar thing. The Business Crime Reduction Partnership in Manchester banned all those convicted of looting and public order offences from city centre stores for a 2-year period. So, you know, it has been done in the past. I think you can view it as controversial, not right, but, you know, it's not that much of a controversial thing. I just think it's been sort of packaged like this. Part of the reason why for that is obviously because of, you know, Denmark's political system and the government that's actually in place right now. But just in general, I don't think it's that controversial, personally.
Well, look, I mean, and the other thing, Dominique, and I'll come to Chris on this, where actually the Met Police are running a trial on a situation at the moment, the Knife Crime Prevention Order. The essence of the Knife Crime Prevention Order is it can be imposed on anyone over 12 or older who is known to regularly carry a knife or has been sentenced when convicted of a knife-related offence. And they can give them a curfew. Does that involve
them having to be at home?
Yeah, it gives them a curfew. So they can't go out at night. They certainly can't go to areas, which, as you say, Dominique, we are running trials like this and these have been used. I mean, I wonder, Chris, in your experience, you've worked with these offenders, you've worked with them all your life. These trials that the Met Police is running at the moment on this one, and if it works, they want to roll it out across police forces across the whole country. I mean, something needs to be done, doesn't it? The reality is, particularly with knife crime, it is still going up. There is too much knife crime on our streets, and we constantly are charging our police with trying to control that and keep everybody safe. So ideas like this are worth trying if it does save one life.
They're not worth trying unless there's some evidence that they're going to work. And the evidence is the exact opposite. Of course, you're absolutely right that, you know, where you have 12-year-olds out on the street with knives and potentially committing what would be serious crimes if they were caught, we've got a big problem in our society. You don't solve it by putting some notice or order like the old ASBOs, which you all know were a complete failure, and targeting this small group of young people. Often it has to be said from minority ethnic communities, you know, very, very largely from ethnic minority communities. It's just another form of treating one group of people in a way that alienates them from society. And do you know, it absolves politicians from addressing the real problems, because there are huge problems with young people in our inner cities, huge problems with drug dealing and violence and all sorts of other things. But this isn't going to solve those problems, and I don't think anybody watching this really thinks it will.
Well, they might think that if they're at home at 12 with a knife between 12 and 5 in the morning, it's better than being on the streets. But I take your point, it's a huge debate, and we'd love to hear what people at home think about that, actually, of a potential solution. I've got a feeling we'll return to this, and it'd be very interesting, both of you, to see what happens in Copenhagen, won't it? And see, as you say, Chris, what evidence is found there for change.
Dominique, Chris, thanks for joining us this morning.